Another type of control that I'd like to cover. So hyperlink is probably the simplest control that has a event or action listener that you can attach to it. Another control that's very useful is a label, and a label is designed to be kind of a passive control. It's not designed to have any interactions. So it's very common to add text or images into a label, and then you can put a label next to other inputs like text fields or buttons or things. It gives it context. You could think of a label as a prompt as to what an input typically is supposed to do. So like if you had a text field, for instance, and you want a name in there, you might have a label that says above their name. So a quick overview here. I want to introduce what a label is. We'll talk about creating a label, adding a label to the scene graph, displaying images in a label, changing the text of a label, and setting the label font. And let me jump into IntelliJ. We can see what example code we will also have. Let me close out of these here. So inside of label, we will have our label example. We will have our change text example and our font example that we'll go through. So a quick introduction here. So the JavaFX label control can display a text or image label inside of JavaFX GUI. The label control must be added to the scene graph if you want it to be visible. And the JavaFX label control is presented in the control package. It's going to have all of our different control elements in there. So if we want to create a label, we have to use the label class, and we can instantiate it using the new keyword. So we can create a new label, and then we pass a string that's going to be the text that's displayed inside that label as our parameter. So if we want to add a label to the scene graph to make the label visible, you have to add it to the scene graph. This means adding it to a scene object or a child of a layout, which is attached to a scene object. Here's an example that attaches a JavaFX label to the scene graph. So here we'll import our label from the control package. Here we will create a new label. And notice one powerful thing about label is we can add it directly to the scene. We don't have to add it to a layout element. Now we can add it to a layout element, and probably will, but we can also just attach it directly to the scene, as you see here. And so notice that the label is added directly to the scene object. Normally you would nest the label inside of a layout component of some kind. We have left that out here to keep the code as simple as possible. And so the result of the running code should look like this. And in fact, let's go to our layout example inside of IntelliJ here, which is going to be, we create a new label, right? We're going to add the label into a layout object. That's typically what you want to do. So a VBox, we'll add that VBox to our scene, and then we'll set our scene into our stage, and then tell our stage to go ahead and show. So let's go ahead and grab this really quick, and let's go ahead and run this inside of our example runner. Get rid of this. Let's go into here to our label section and run the main method here. And let's show context. Let's import that, and let's run this so we can see it in action. So here we're gonna wait for IntelliJ to use Gradle to build this out. And there we go. We can see that is our label text inside of our scene, inside of our stage. Just as an example, proof of concept of how that runs. So let's go back to our slides and continue out this presentation. Okay, so if we want to display images in a label, it is possible to display an image inside of a label next to the label text. The JavaFX label class contains a constructor that can take a node as an extra parameter. So here is a JavaFX label example that adds an image to the label using the JavaFX image view component. So again, let's take a look at this code, and the highlighted parts are what I think are the interesting parts. So here we're going to import a label. In addition to that, we want to import an image. So we're going to do the same thing we've learned on how to display images. So we're going to import the image class. And if we want to build an image, we need the file input stream to wrap around the image. And if we want to view the image, we have to import the image view element to wrap around the image that wraps around the file input stream. Okay, so here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do everything I do to be able to render an image. So I'm going to build a file input stream that wraps around the image inside of our file system. Then I'm going to wrap an image element around my input stream, my file input stream. Then I'm going to wrap the image view object around the image instance that we have. And then I can then go ahead and pass, when I define my label, I can not only put a string that will go into the label, but I can also pass in a parameter that is a node. And since image view is a node, it's a valid parameter I could pass in there, and that will also become part of my label. Then I can add that label directly into my scene, give it a width and a height, set that scene to my stage and tell my stage to show. And so the result of running this in JavaFX will be a label that has my label and also has that image in there. If I want to change the text of a label, we can change the text of a label using a set text method. So this can be done while the application is running. So you can change the context of your labels in real time. So again, label.setText, and then you just pass in a new string as a parameter, and it will update the text in the label. If we want to set the label font, we can change the font used by JavaFX label by calling its set font method. And again, this is useful if you want to change the size or of the text, or if you want to change to a different style. So again, you would do this the same way you would change the font on any other text element inside of JavaFX. So you have set font, and then you can pass in a font element. You can either get the font elements by calling the font constructor or just using the font static factory method. And so here, let's take a quick look at the other example. So here we talked about changing the text, and this is just going to set the text to some new text. So very trivial and basic example, but let's go ahead and run it to see it in action. I will go to example runner, and I will go ahead and let's go ahead and import this class. And now let's run this here. And so you'll see that calling the set text allows me to, while the application logic is running, actually set the text to something right here. New label text is now displayed. And then again, we can do the same thing with being able to update the font. And so here, just like what we saw inside of the slides, we have the set font where we pass it a new font. Let's go ahead and run this examples just so we can see it in IntelliJ. You know how to run this, and then you can play around with it on your own, as this code will be provided to you inside of our repo that's available. And then let's run that. And here you can see that when it launches, this is the new font that is updated inside that label. So you can see everything that we do with the text element, we can do using the label as well. But the label allows us to add it directly to the scene or into a layout, preferably into a layout. And so that's all I want to say with using the label control, which is a passive control, right? It allows us to embed images or nodes or text, but it doesn't really take any action listeners. Hyperlinks for that, buttons are for that. We'll look at more controls next time, but now we're really starting to learn how we can populate our scene graph to start displaying things. We'll just continue that moving forward. Is there any questions that anyone has after today?